All right, welcome to Full Momentum and HEC-RAS podcast. I am your host, Ben Cary. This is episode 18, and we got some very cool content to talk about with you guys today, including a really awesome guest that we're excited to have on the podcast. We'll introduce him here in a second, but before we get going, I just want to take a second to thank our sponsor for this episode, which is our firm, Kleinschmidt Associates. Kleinschmidt Associates is known throughout the industry as a firm that provides practical solutions to complex problems affecting energy, water, and the environment. You can learn more about Kleinschmidt at kleinschmidtgroup.com. So thank you to Kleinschmidt for sponsoring this episode. And yeah, let's get going. So Chris, I'll toss it over to you to introduce our guest, which is it's really exciting to have somebody on the podcast today. So pass it off to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Ben. And it's super cool to get back together with you. It's been several months since we've done one of these, but we wanted to keep people in suspense for this excellent guest we have today. I'd like to introduce Grady Hillhouse. Grady is the author, creator, whatever you want to call it, of Practical Engineering YouTube site. And it's just a real honor and treat to have you on, Grady. So Grady's a civil engineer, if you didn't know or haven't figured that out already. Science communicator, widely known for his educational video series, Practical Engineering. Currently one of the largest engineering channels on YouTube, which is just insane considering you only started this about 6 years ago, I think, Grady, or 7 years ago. It's incredible. You've got over 2 million subscribers, millions of views each month. I was looking through some of your videos, and you get like consistently anywhere from 2 to 10 million or even more views on these videos. So his videos focus on infrastructure and the human-made world around us. Grady's garnered media attention from around the world and has been featured in Make Magazine, Hackaday, Gizmodo, and on both the Science Channel and Discovery Channel. Before producing videos full-time, Grady spent 9 years in private consulting, working on a wide variety of infrastructure projects with a focus on dams and hydraulic structures. And he's got videos on practical engineering, anything from soil stability, concrete design, power generation, space elevators, and of course, my favorite, hydraulic design and hydraulic modeling. And if you go back even far enough on some of Grady's videos, you'll see he started out with woodworking video, which is videos which are near and dear to my heart because I'm a woodworker too, Grady.
Oh,
and
nice.
I was looking at some of your videos though, and I got a lot of practice to get caught up to your skill level, but I enjoy doing it nonetheless. So anyway, Grady, it's great to have you. Welcome to the Full Momentum podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for that really nice intro.
Well, you deserve it. You've done something incredible for, I think, for civil engineering and people like me and Ben and others who are just maybe even just interested, and they're not even engineers yet, but maybe they're thinking of that as a career. And I think it's fantastic what you're doing. And it also helps us out because I don't know about you, Ben, but I have a tough time explaining what I do to like families and relatives. And Grady has this excellent knack of just explaining complicated engineering processes at a really easy to understand level. And I think that probably, Grady, has something to do with the fact that you, like me, you have a wife as a teacher, right?
That's right. Well, at the time I started, she was. Now she's moved up to be an assistant principal for an elementary school, but yeah, it's still heavily involved in elementary education. And you're definitely right that was a big part of how all this started for me was, learning to make my career accessible and engaging to, little kids who, have absolutely no context for what engineering is in the first place.
Yeah, so tell us about how this all started. If I recall, and I don't know if I saw this on an interview you've done before, or maybe in emails we had before, you said something about you started with a kind of a science fair at school for your wife. Tell us about how that all got going.
Yes, I mean, this was my hobby for a really long time. And so it kind of, had a whole bunch of different inputs to it just based on what was interesting and keeping me busy after work and on the weekends. So as you mentioned, part of it was woodworking, right? That was kind of my first exposure to YouTube as a social media platform rather than just a search engine for videos. You know, I was trying to learn how to use these tools that I had, and you get exposed to these people and you start to realize like, oh, this is someone I've seen before. I've seen other videos he made, and like I can see that he's building this audience and creating a community, and that was so interesting to me. And so part of it was I just wanted to be part of that community on YouTube of woodworkers. And then the other part was I was starting a career as a civil engineer and was learning all these new things and being exposed to all these new ideas, and at the same time trying to communicate those to kids at my wife's elementary school and at other schools. And so all that stuff kind of started mix, and I was building demonstrations to bring to elementary schools to show kids. And I was like, well, what if I make a video about that, because I'm already making these videos about woodworking. And so video production kind of became the hobby to combine all hobbies. And so it just kind of grew from there. And as the channel got traction and as I got more feedback, I just started to kind of lean into that role of making civil engineering and infrastructure accessible to a bigger audience. And that's kind of been my mission since then, and I've just slowly tried to improve all the different parts of that process over the years.
Now, it seems, Grady, that your interests in terms of engineering are quite broad. And maybe even somebody would say your expertise, which is really impressive to watch the video. And I'm sure a lot of that is based on your experience, and a lot of it might be self-taught or self-learned on some of these topics that you're interested in. Did you always have such a broad interest in different engineering topics, and you just ended up in civil? Or how did that all work? Because obviously your videos, are definitely leaning towards more civil type topics, but it's pretty broad. So how did that all happen?
Yes, I mean, my path to civil engineering was a little bit sinuous. I have a bachelor's degree in geography, actually, and didn't get my civil degree until my master's. And so, being a little bit older student in my master's degree and taking the civil engineering coursework, it really just kind of lit a fire in me, and it's made me start noticing like everything around me, things that I never paid attention to before. And I just got so interested in like, how does that work and what does that do? And just head in the clouds nonstop when I'm on road trips or on walks or whatever. My wife hates it because I have to stop and take pictures of stuff. But yeah, so I mean, I've always been just interested in infrastructure as a topic in general. And civil engineering was kind of my way into that. And civil engineers touch a lot of those different pieces, but I've just been kind of a constant student ever since of engineering in general and the built environment, basically.
Yeah, it's incredible the wide variety of things that you get into, because Ben and I are both civil engineers too. And, our focus is obviously in hydraulics and in the hydrology. And I feel like that gives me enough. I mean, I don't have much more room to fit anything else in there. Yeah. So I've always been impressed how you broaden out, the ability to explain things in a wide variety of fields. So kudos to you on that. That's really cool. But I'm kind of interested, Grady, was there like a moment where you realized, hey, this is actually going to be a big thing? Like when you started doing these videos, I'm sure like anyone else, you started out with, a few people. Like, oh, cool, I got 20 views, but like, when did you realize, hey, this is actually a big deal? Like,
yeah, I mean, there really wasn't a watershed moment. It was kind of like each video I made was an opportunity to improve on not just like the technical aspect of video production, like better lights and better sound and that stuff, but also like how to choose a topic that has broad interest and how to write a script that is engaging and kind of organizes the information in a way that kind of keeps you interested throughout the whole thing. Like there's just so many things, and I for some reason it just hooked me. Like every single video I made, I was like, oh, I could have done this better, or I could have done this. And so like slowly I just started to see those views come in, and get more, YouTube is a cool platform because, I mean, sometimes the comments aren't great, but a lot of times they are very positive and constructive. And so I was able to get like lots of feedback from people saying, hey, you should do this, or here's an idea for another topic. And so, I was just incorporating all that and trying to make the videos better and better. There were a few, kind of big moments in the channel. One of one was there's a pretty popular YouTube channel produced by a guy named Tom Scott. He's a British guy, and his kind of stick is doing little just little tidbits, not necessarily about the constructed environment, but just short videos, usually on site, of interesting places and things like that. And every year he goes on vacation for a month, and so he invites guests to do a guest video on his channel. And so I put in an application for that and got chosen, and did a video about the Hyatt Regency walkway failure, and just a very short overview of what happened and how that impacted the whole field of engineering and engineering ethics. And that was really like, because he was kind of over my shoulder looking at the script and saying, oh, he kind of coached me through the production process of that video to make sure it fit well on his channel. And that's one of the moments where I was like, oh, I really see how this works. Like I can take these complex topics in engineering and show, a broad audience who don't have that context and that background, how this works. And that can be really interesting to people. And so that was one of the bigger moments for me, definitely.
Did you look back? Oh, sorry, Ben. Just real quick, did you see like an immediate uptick in views after you did that?
Yes, definitely. That was a big moment in terms of driving viewership to the channel. And that was probably the first big leap in subscribers and views, and just people following what I was doing.
Yeah. Do you look back on some of those first couple of videos that you did and cringe when you watch them, or or do you look back at, because like we've obviously only done 18 of these, but even we look back on some of the first couple we did, and in some ways it's cringy, and in some ways it's kind of inspiring because we've come quite a ways, and that's pretty cool to see. So
yeah, I feel the same way about it. Like, I mean, I've never deleted a video off the channel. You can go back and look at how much things have improved. And so, every once in a while I do go back and watch an old video just to kind of refresh my motivation and see how far I've come. But yeah, it's kind of tough to watch too, because you're like, man, I didn't know what the heck I was doing back then.
Yeah, you mentioned something about how you came up with topics, and one of the things you mentioned is people in viewers throwing out different ideas for you and potentially incorporating some of those. One thing I noticed about watching your videos is it's really cool how so many, and this is just the reality of civil engineering, so many of the topics that you cover, you'll connect to a previous video that you had done.
Yeah.
Is that something, so when you're coming up with this episode, an episode, are you, I guess, what's the word? Are you coming up with it in terms of like, are you creating a web where you're saying, okay, hey, I'm going to do all these topics and they're all going to connect back to a central theme, or I'm going to do this topic and based on after I do this, I'm going to be able to do 3 more topics that kind of branch off of that? Or are they truly kind of all independent, and then in the reality, or when you do them, you can kind of be like, oh yeah, that connects back to this. Like, how does your thought process work on that?
Yeah, a few things there. So, I mean, probably at the beginning, I was more focused on like kind of providing aiming toward providing a comprehensive coverage of topics. And so you could see my videos were much more kind of aligned with college coursework or textbooks or traditional topics that you would learn within an engineering education. But now I focus more on just like, how can I take some piece or part of engineering or the constructed environment and make that engaging to someone else. So, it's just anything that, it could be a small tidbit or an interesting case study or anything that can kind of open that door so that someone who doesn't know anything about engineering or hasn't been exposed to that, can enter that world and kind of peek behind that curtain to see the types of stuff that we do, that we get up to.
Okay, so Grady, so this is, this channel that Ben and I do, this podcast, it's all about HEC-RAS. So I'd be remiss not to kind of get into it a little bit with you. And I know that you've done some HEC-RAS modeling in the past. I don't know if that was a big part of your work or just something you had once in a while, but tell us about your HEC-RAS background and how you got into it and what kind of stuff you did with it. Yeah,
so I got for a time pretty involved in running HEC-RAS models as a part of. So when I was in consulting, I worked mainly on dams, and so as a part of the design of a few new dams, quite a few rehabilitation projects, I did quite a bit of HEC-RAS modeling, and even got involved, like you guys, in teaching others how to do HEC-RAS. So my company had the contract for ASDSO's courses for a little while, and I did the same thing as you, teaching HEC-RAS courses during the pandemic over the internet, which was an adventure. But it was a lot of fun too. So yeah, I did a lot of running HEC-RAS models. Not a lot for floodplain modeling, but for breach analysis for dams and just hydraulic impact studies downstream of dams.
Did you ever reference the RAS Solution blog, either in the consulting world or?
So I mean, especially when I was first getting started, Chris, you were kind of a hero to us because we didn't have. There was nothing like what you did with that blog. Like there was no one putting out content on the internet that like was applicable to us and our careers. And so that was so cool to have someone, and especially for a program like RAS, where there's no support, there's no one you can call up and say, hey, I need help with this. To have someone who was like regularly putting out blog posts about the software and how it could be used and all these kind of new ways and tricks and updates about new features and stuff. That was just so cool for us, I remember. And I was a follower, all the way through my career as an engineer.
Well, thanks, Ben, for asking that of Grady.
I teed you up there, Chris.
No, but that's cool to hear, Grady. Yeah, it was definitely, it came out of the fact that there is no official technical support from the software developers. And so a lot of people like myself, we were on an island. I had the benefit of having worked there for a few years, and so I knew the developers very well. Still friends with all those guys today. But sometimes you just can't get a hold of them or whatever, or sometimes I could get a hold of them and I could find out an answer, and then I want to share that with everybody.
Yeah.
Because it's like, hey, I know this, but there are tons of other people who don't know how to do X, Y, Z. So that's where that came out of. It's kind of interesting to go back and see how these kinds of things, like whether it's practical engineering or the RAS solution or full momentum for that matter, got started. So
it's really.
Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I was just going to add in, it's really interesting just because we're talking about these two things, which are different in a lot of ways, but similar in a lot of ways too. And that is kind of the whole idea of content sharing and being transparent with expertise, because that's something I think even 10 or 20 years ago was really hard to find. And I think that's part of the reason why the RAS solution, was very unique, is there was a little bit of a hesitancy to allow people behind the curtain when it comes to certain levels of expertise and things like that. And, I'd be remiss if there wasn't a little bit of hesitation, even internal to Kleinschmidt, when it came to this podcast. Cause it's like, hey, why are we going to be putting out little short lesson plans on, how to become a better hydraulic modeler? Like, we want to do that. We're the experts. We want to be known as that. But at the same time, there's definitely this shift that's occurring, I think, just in the technical world when it comes to, how to market yourself as an expert. And one of the ways that it seems like there's more and more people figuring out is really effective is to, have short little, blog lessons, kind of like what practical engineering is, what kind of like what full momentum is, and just be transparent and not necessarily, be scared that somebody's going to learn something from you and be better from it. That's a real positive thing. And so it's just been really interesting to see how, what you're saying, Grady, about how the RAS solution was new and there wasn't anything like that. In a lot of ways, I think practical engineering is kind of like that too, when it comes to, lessons. And then you have other things like the Khan Academy, which is kind of a similar kind of idea of, just really awesome knowledge sharing. It's really cool to see how that is transforming. And I'm sure in, 10, 20 years, there might be a lot of practical engineerings or a lot of full momentum podcasts where there's a lot of free accessible content out there. And it's a way for companies and individuals to market themselves. It's really neat. So.
Yeah, for sure.
So Grady, I want to get back to your HEC-RAS skills because there was so I had been a fan of practical engineering for many, many years, but there's one video that you put out where I was like, okay, now I'm a super fan of practical engineering. And that's the one where that was the HEC-RAS one, right?
Right.
You probably knew where I was going with that already. And I don't think you did anything on HEC-RAS, certainly not as the topic. I don't know, you may have mentioned it before in previous videos, but I think this was the first one where I realized, hey, Grady he's a HEC-RAS user. He knows how to do this stuff. And so I want to play some of this. I'm going to share my screen, but while we're running this, can you guys see this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is Grady's HEC-RAS model on Mars. And I'm going to be, this is totally honest here, Grady, but when I first saw this, I was a little jealous because I was thinking about doing the same thing. Awesome. And I was like, oh, but that's okay because it's really cool. But so Grady, can you tell us how you set this up and what was the inspiration for doing it?
Yeah, so I was in the 2D class when this idea first sprung. I think it was put on by West.
Yeah. I remember I was really disappointed because I was supposed to teach that class, but I had conflict. And so one of my colleagues taught it. And I don't know, somehow, I talked to you after this came out, I talked to him or you, and you said you were in the class and we figured out that you were in that class. And I was like, oh man, I wish I would have taught it then.
So I was learning how to use the 2D features of HEC-RAS and like just so into it, just excited about the new features. And so I got a little bit ahead of myself in the class, worked through some of the examples a little quickly and RAS, one of the things I was so impressed with was how easily you could bring in terrain data sets, like having used ArcGIS and other GIS softwares and really struggled with working with terrain data sets. RAS was just like, wow, this is really robust. I wonder if, NASA or someone else puts out data on other planets. And so I went searching around and found this data set for Mars and had to do a bunch of weird stuff to it to get it to pull into RAS, like change, do a fake projection and stuff like that. But eventually got it to pull in and built a grid over the top of it and just, ran some flow through I think it's called the Cathay Valley, which is like this really prominent flow feature on the surface of Mars. And that, they kind of, scientists think that this was formed from like a major breach event, not a breach of a dam, obviously, but a breach, I think, of an ice reservoir or something like that. And so I thought it'd be fun to, kind of recreate that in a way.
Yeah, and it's perfectly set up for building a model because there's we've got great, I don't know if it was how they got it was, if it was LiDAR or what, but they've got great digital terrain data. There's nothing in the way you can actually see the old scarring patterns from where the water was flowing. So you can almost like self-calibrate this thing.
Oh, it's incredible.
Yeah, so I was very impressed with that, Grady. And now, by the way, I know this is something you probably thought about. I think you might have even mentioned it in the video, but that, gravity is obviously different on Mars. There was, I don't know if you knew this, but there for a while, you could actually, if you asked the HEC-RAS team, they would give you a Mars version of RAS Did you know that?
That's awesome. No, I didn't know that.
And it was simply a version where they changed gravity.
Oh, that's so cool.
But now in the latest version, you can actually, there is an input for gravity. So you don't have to ask them for the Mars version anymore.
Nice.
Of course, there are other things, I'm sure, like pressure has something to do with it.
Yeah.
But still really cool that you did that. And beyond just the Mars video, but just your explanation of HEC-RAS and what it's used for, who's using it. I started, when people would ask me, hey, what do you do for a living? I would literally, I'm not kidding you, I would send them to your video and say, watch this video, because this explains it like perfectly, a lot better than I could.
That's awesome.
One of the things I was thinking about when I was watching that video, Chris, of that Mars breach run that Grady set up was how cool it would be to do in the new 3D viewer now with RAS 6.1. So Grady, I don't know how familiar you are with the new RAS 6.1.
I'm kind of out of the RAS game now, so I haven't been keeping up with all the cool new features, but I have seen some posts and stuff that it looks really cool.
Yeah. They came out with a bunch of new features in this 6.0 release, and it's now 6.1. And one of the really cool ones is they have a 3D viewer that you can kind of navigate through space and your terrain. So that would have been really, really cool to see that Mars breach in a 3D
Nice.
realm. In fact, I was going to share the screen and just show Grady so you can get an idea of what this looks like. So this was actually a recreation of the Johnstown dam failure in Pennsylvania that Chris and I did for one of our episodes. It was episode 15, actually, not too many episodes ago. So we just kind of created a forensic model of that situation. We added in the actual Johnstown dam from before it was breached. And we did that using one of the new terrain modification tools that's available in the new version. And then we did kind of a 3D flyover of the reservoir and then the breach that occurs downstream, just to kind of illustrate, what that looks like from a 3D realm. So this will give you kind of a good idea of what that looks like. And you can actually see the breach wave kind of start, and we're going to kind of follow it down as we move closer to the town of Johnstown. So it's a really powerful tool. It's really, really cool to be able to show results like this to a client, for instance, if you're developing a breach model or any other sort of model, because you just get a lot more from what it looks like in 3D.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, one of the coolest parts of RAS, I think, are the ways that you can show results. And it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing, right? Because it's so much easier to communicate model results now than it was with a 1D model where you just had to show cross sections or profiles. But it's also way easier to believe the results, even if they're wrong.
That's true.
Very true.
It's so convincing to see it that way. And even if the model is set up to completely wrong, it's like, man, it looks so intuitive that it's so easy to believe those results. And that was always something we had to fight against.
Yeah.
Well, not only seeing the results or displaying them, but even as the modeler, especially with 2D models and the way the 2D engine set up in HEC-RAS, it can be pretty difficult to know that you have a very unstable or a model that's not actually working. We talk about this all the time. And when you used to do 1D modeling, it was pretty clear when you had instabilities or issues. The model would crash, get crazy errors, crazy water surface profiles. But the 2D engine is so stable and it's so easy to set up. You can get yourself into a lot of trouble if you don't know what you're doing. So it's kind of that double-edged sword there that you were kind of illustrating. So
you can go through an entire 2D simulation with all blue bars, no errors listed at all, and then go look at RAS Mapper and find out, there's some really bad stuff in here. So
yeah. I think I probably still have bruises on my forehead from trying to get the unsteady models to run properly. And 2D was just like a dream come true for a RAS modeler. But you're right. Like it was definitely a double-edged sword in some cases.
Go ahead, Chris.
You got to know what you're doing. Anyway,
another thing that caught my eye, Grady, that was really neat. And I was watching some videos this morning actually before this interview, and realized that you had done an episode on the Edenville and Stanford dam failures, which was super well done. And you probably don't know this, but Chris and I actually did an episode right after that. And kind of talked about what that situation would look like from a modeling standpoint, whether it be a 2D or a 1D model, because the river itself downstream of those dams looks fairly one-dimensional when you're looking at aerial imagery. But some of the images and videos that you were showing, when that once you get the water high enough, it's a very, very two-dimensional situation. Yeah. So that was it was really relevant at the time, which we always try to incorporate kind of current events into these podcasts. And two, it was kind of a really good illustration of how you can have a 1D model under a certain flow regime, and then once you get above that, oftentimes you can have a totally different modeling situation. So anyway, I just thought that was really cool that both of us covered the same topic within the last year. That was pretty neat.
Yeah. So obviously with my background, that's one of my favorite topics to cover is issues related to dams, and that that was just such an interesting event. And I mean, thank goodness that no one was hurt or killed during it. But I mean, it was one of a cascading dam failure of that magnitude you just don't see very often. And so and geotechnically there were some big lessons to be learned too. So yeah, once that interim report came out from the forensic team, I knew I wanted to try to make a video covering that topic.
I thought you did a really good job too of carefully wording your discussion or your preview of some of the management issues with that particular event. Because when they I think they put out an initial report really quickly after the dam was released, and one of the things they talked about was how the management of the reservoir level and kind of the controversy behind that was probably a pretty significant contributor to the event. So my follow-up to that is, one, I thought you did a good job of wording that carefully, because obviously you have a big audience, so it's probably not something you want to say something you don't mean. Do you find that there are, because I know that you've done a couple forensic episodes where you look at failures or things, with the larger audience that you have, do you have to be really conscious of talking about these things so that you aren't implicated in anything? Or
yeah, I do. I mean, I'm very thoughtful about it. Obviously, when I was working as a consultant, these are topics that I wouldn't even consider talking about for sure, because of the potential conflicts of interest with my day job. But now that I do this full time, I can talk about the events, but I still do have to be very thoughtful about how they're covered. And part of that for me is, my channel is about engineering, and I really want to maintain that focus. And so I kind of have to recognize that there are human factors in every, major safety issue with dams or otherwise. But that's not really what I want to cover on the channel. And so I try to say somewhere in all those videos, like, hey, if you just watch this video and this is the only thing you learned about the event, you don't have the whole story. So you need to go somewhere else to get that, because that's just not what I'm providing you. I'm talking about the engineering details and just that. So I try to be very explicit about it, and I think I'm getting a little better about it. But I mean, the reality is, that especially when you're talking about failures, it's not just a technical issue, right? There's almost always management issues, political issues, all kinds of human factors that are involved. And that's not the stuff that I have expertise in. That's not the stuff that I'm good at. And that's not what the channel's focused on. And so I try to leave that stuff out of the story without trying to imply that it has no involvement, because it does. And we all know it does.
Yeah. I was wondering too about these videos that you make, and they're so well produced, and you've got really cool audio backing to it, and a lot of cool graphics, which I'm just amazed at, the graphics that you have. And I'm wondering, one, do you have a team that helps you make these, or are you working solo on this? And two, how long do you take? I'm sure it varies from video to video, but just generally speaking, like, how long does it take to put one of these videos together? All the research you got to put in, and all that. Yeah,
it's a lot. So the first question, I do have a small team. I have a production assistant who helps. He basically does the assembly edits for videos. So he kind of once all the production is done, he kind of assembles everything according to the script and helps like pull stock footage and stuff like that. And then I also have recently brought on a fact checker / copy editor for scripts, just for some quality control there. But everything else, at least right now, is me, and I'm hoping to get more people involved now that I have a better handle on the production process. Because before, when it was a hobby, it was just like whatever I can get done within, I had a monthly schedule, and so it was whatever I can get done within this month is what goes in the video, and that's it. I only have so much free time, and so it was more of a triage situation. Whereas now, I have the time and the resources to invest in, like you mentioned, better graphics, better equipment, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, in terms of graphics, that's all me. I build all the demos. I do all the writing. So most of the video production process is me, and it's a lot of time. Yeah, it takes, on average, I would say, probably 80 to 100 man hours per video, from the research all the way through post production. And I mean, most of that's my hours, but not all of it.
Wow. Yeah. Now the graphics that you do in the animations of those graphics, is this something that you already had some expertise in, or did you think, okay, I'm making these videos, I want to up my game here, I'm going to learn how to do this stuff, and then just kind of figure out how to do it?
That's all any of this is, right? I have no formal training in any part of the video production process. So like every part of it has been like just a learning process for me. And yeah, graphics are the same thing, because sometimes it's the best way to show something. You don't always have a photo or a video of something, and you can't always get it. And so learning to do illustration and simple motion graphics. I don't do anything really sophisticated on the channel, but simple ways of bringing in motion graphics has been a learning process for me. And that's probably the first thing that I'll hopefully offload to someone else if I can kind of get a handle on the production process, so it's not so last minute. Because now some of that stuff happens like the day before the video publishes, so it's hard to hand that off to someone else right now.
Yeah, I watched the Suez Canal video that you did, and I definitely noticed like some really graphics that just told the story better than words could do, Right. So I totally get what you're saying there.
So my last question I have for you, Grady, is kind of about, what your target audience is at this point, because I'm sure from the time that you started doing woodworking videos to now, your goal as far as target audience has changed. Because one of the really cool things about your videos, it seems to me, is it's something that you could show to, definitely high schoolers, maybe even middle schoolers in a lot of instances, all the way up to people like, Chris and I that are, experts in areas of hydraulic engineering, and it covers kind of the full spectrum. Is that your target audience, or do you make the videos kind of with a particular smaller niche group?
Yeah, so you're right. It definitely has changed over time. And honestly, especially at the beginning of the channel, as I would start to simplify things, that honestly felt like a sacrifice to the integrity of the content, right? Like I felt like maybe I was dumbing stuff down too much. But the truth is, it wasn't that at all, right? It was a way for me to take some of the things that I had special knowledge about or special expertise in, and make that accessible to a bigger group of people. And that there's nothing negative about that, right? I think that's a positive in every way. And so I don't have like a set of criteria or an age range that I shoot for, but I do have, some things that I do when I write a script to make sure that like you said, there's going to be something in there for everyone, right? So I try to avoid jargon, and if I ever use a word that like I don't think many people are going to know about, I define it right there and then, or just leave it out of the script altogether. I try to always include some like something fundamental in engineering, like an equation or some fundamental principle, so that people do feel like they got a peek behind the curtain of like what an actual engineer would be using or what they would be doing. And I always try to structure content to where I can't think of the best way to put this, but you're kind of learning the lessons along the way, right? Like, especially in civil engineering, I think you get to a point where you forget why you do things. You just know you do it this specific way. And I try to always write the scripts where you're kind of realizing throughout the whole process, like, oh, here's why we have to do this. And, you know, I kind of pose a problem and let the audience realize, like, this specific part of the built world is a practical solution to a problem. And I try to structure the scripts that way so that it feels more intuitive, basically. So that's a very roundabout way of answering your question, but
no, I think it's very legitimate, and it makes sense in terms of how it's constructed, and obviously it works, which is the bottom line, probably most important thing. So,
well, I mean, one of my just favorite things about your videos, Grady, and the channel and the things that you do is the impact I know it's having on young kids who are trying to decide what they want to do for their career. And, you know, we all here know, and everyone in our field knows, we need good engineers to fill in behind us as we grow old and leave.
Yeah.
And some of us move on to retire completely and just do YouTube videos. So we need new Gradys to come in behind the old Grady. So I think it's great. I mentioned before early on, my wife's a teacher too, and in fact, she's a STEM teacher, and so I've shared the channel with her, and she shared it with her students, and so, you know, I know that there's a lot of young kids who are being inspired by what you do. So I think it's fantastic. Yeah,
thank you. I mean, that's something that's really important to me, because, as I mentioned, my path to where to my engineering career was not straightforward. And part of that was because I grew up in a small town. I didn't have exposure from civil engineers. I didn't know any civil engineers, and I had no clue that was even a career I could choose. And so that is super important to me. And it's so encouraging and motivating to get, emails from professors saying, hey, I showed your video in my class, or emails from students say, hey, I'm going into engineering in college because of some of the videos I saw. Like, that stuff is just so exciting to me and so nice to hear. So I it's not, the number one goal of the channel, but it is such a nice side benefit of it, for sure.
I also love the really subtle digs at civils too, where, like, I think one of your last videos you were talking about something that was really exciting, and then you clarified, well, civil engineering exciting. Just like, if you're a civil engineer, it's just so good. It's just so great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of that is, like, that's kind of the thesis of the channel, right? Is that, like, we're not so dignified that people can't understand what it is that we do for a living. Like, half of civil engineers just think about dirt all day, right? There's no reason to pretend why. This is this career field that people can't understand or can't access or engage with. And so I like to throw a little humor in there, just to admit, like, we're all human, and and civil engineers are just like anyone else.
Self-deprecation is always
yeah, and then the thing, especially with the kids too, that they love YouTube. I have 3 kids. I have 3 daughters. My youngest is in high school right now. She's 16, and she loves watching videos on YouTube. And I actually mentioned to her the other day, hey, I'm going to be interviewing a YouTube superstar. And she was like, oh, really? One of your engineering things, right? And then I said, well, check out his channel. And she looked and she saw the views, the millions of views. And she was like, oh, wow. And all of a sudden, she's very interested. She's not interested, at least now, in engineering. She was very interested in the fact that you had a legit YouTube channel. And so it's important to those kids. But hey, I want to just quickly talk about Spillways and HEC-RAS. Grady, I wanted to make sure we did something HEC-RAS related and some kind of learning here on this. And knowing your background, I have to imagine at some point you asked the question, can I model this spillway in HEC-RAS that I'm designing?
Oh, yeah.
And I want to kind of like, let me just show a couple slides, and I want to get your take and experience on it, Grady, and your background, and you tell us what you've done in the past. But
okay.
I get this question a lot. Hey, can we model the spillway in HEC-RAS? And my first reaction is probably not. You probably shouldn't be doing that, but you can do it. I mean, it's not like there's a check on, hey, am I modeling a spillway? Okay, yeah. I'm not going to let you do that. So you can put together a model. Here's one of the biggest problems is RAS is all about hydrostatic pressure assumptions. So we're assuming that there's a hydrostatic pressure distribution as you go down in depth. So linear increase in pressure with depth. And one of the things you don't have on spillways or really steep slopes for that matter is hydrostatic pressure. That tends to break down over time. And so we don't have the ability to do that in RAS. And this is right out of the manual. It talks about 1 to 10 is kind of being the upper limit of a slope that you want to model. Most spillways are going to be greater than 1 to 10, at least the chute part of the spillway, right? And there are other limitations too, because you have extreme vertical accelerations, you have variation in velocity in the water column, so vertically, and whether you're doing 1D or 2D, we're looking at depth averaged conditions. So we aren't able to describe the change in velocity with depth. RAS doesn't also inherently compute air entrainment, although I did discover that it will compute that and does compute that for you in 1D.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that was something I didn't realize. They kind of, there's a lot of things they sneak in there they don't tell the world about. And you might just kind of find out about it if you read the manual from cover to cover. But the other thing is it doesn't simulate cross waves or standing waves. It's certainly not in 1D. You can get some of that in 2D, but I would argue that it's probably not extremely robust in how it calculates the cross waves and standing waves. And it also doesn't do anything with splashing. And these are all things when you're designing wall heights for chutes that you need to know about because, I mean, Orville is a great example of, a spillway chute that basically was damaged. And I think you've got some videos on this too, Grady. But it wasn't a wall height issue per se, but when the thing was spilling out the side, you can see the damage it can do when water can get outside of the chute, all the erosion, and then how that compromises the structure and ultimately the dam. Here's the air entrainment thing that I wanted to point out to people. This is also in the manual, and this is done automatically for 1D. Anytime you run a 1D model, RAS is going to look for Froude numbers greater than 1.6. And if it has that, it's going to use this equation or this one to figure out what the adjusted depth is at that location to account for air entrainment. So that's kind of a nice feature, and it makes kind of spillway modeling a little bit more accessible in RAS, but I would still say there's other issues to deal with. And so just want to end it with some considerations. When you're trying to do a spillway, understand that there's a lot of error, a lot of uncertainty in what you're doing. But if you're looking for a quick study, quick idea of what kind of depths and velocities you might get, go ahead and use it just cautiously, but you're going to need very tight cross sections and very small cells, and that's going to result in very small time steps. In fact, I've done a spillway recently where we had to have time steps all the way down to 0.1, or I think we even time sliced it to less than 0.1 second. So, check the air entrainment solution if you're doing a 1D model. If it's 2D, you might consider adding in the air entrainment solution as a custom user-defined map, which you can now do in version 6.1 of HEC-RAS. Estimate cross wave heights and splashing. There's that reference, the hydraulic design of flood control channels that the Corps puts out that I showed a second ago. I think it's EM 1601. That would be a great one to look at. And then obviously look for accuracy and any indications of instability, which there's a high likelihood of getting instabilities, especially if you're going to do this in unsteady flow. And then add a safety factor. If this is a design, you don't want the design to fail. You don't want your name on a design that doesn't work. So add that safety factor in there. And this is an example of some of the things you're not going to get in RAS, these cross waves, the splashing, riding up the walls, all these things, if water can splash out, it can cause erosion down there and compromise the structure. And so you want to be very aware of that. And you can see the white air entrainment built in. Here's a Flow 3D model that actually does pick up a lot of these things that RAS doesn't. And so I would really highly encourage you to consider 3D modeling, CFD modeling, if you have to do a design on a spillway and you want to be as accurate as possible.
So much of this just comes back to, when we talk about RAS and knowing the limitations of whatever situation you're trying to model, right? I mean, every situation that you model is going to have limitations. Obviously, there's certain situations that RAS is built for that the limitations are going to be very small. And then there's other applications like spillway modeling where you certainly can do it and you can get answers from it that can be helpful at maybe a higher 10,000 foot level when it comes to analysis. But understanding the limitations and what that means in terms of not utilizing these results for, a real detailed design and things like that. That's really what this comes down to. Like we talk about a lot of times, is just understanding the limitations, when to use RAS, when to, how much to use RAS for a given situation, and when to go to other software or other tools to get the answers for certain situations.
Yeah. So Grady, think way back to your consulting days, years gone by.
Yeah.
And tell us about your experience with spillways and how you went about designing, say, wall height, or just understanding what kind of velocities you might have or depths.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to be involved in the design of quite a few spillways, from very small to very large, and luckily, got to run everything from just hand calculations of velocity and depth all the way through HEC-RAS, through Flow 3D, and was lucky enough to work on a few full scale physical models built in the Utah State Hydraulic Research Laboratory. So I got to see a lot of stuff, and yeah, I definitely echo everything you said there. We used HEC-RAS for a few things on spillways. One of the biggest uses, I think, was earth and auxiliary spillways, where you have very, very wide channels and small depths. It was just a nice way to get a kind of first estimate of a water surface profile down that kind of structure, especially when usually you don't have concrete training walls, you just have earth and berms, and so it's not too much more expensive to go up a foot or 2 more feet to to get a little more freeboard on those. Right. One thing you didn't mention was location and characterizing the hydraulic jump at the toe of a spillway, and that's always a really big question, especially with those earthen spillways. Like for all my different flow rates that I care about, where's that hydraulic jump going to form, and how high is it going to be, and stuff like that. So that's another thing that you don't want to use HEC-RAS to try to figure out. It's not a good question for HEC-RAS. But you'll always be so amazed at how different, as you step up in complexity from simple hand calculations all the way to scale physical modeling, how different the results are, and how simplified, how much each step left out of the one below, basically.
Yeah, I got the opportunity early in my career, the first 7 years or so, to do a lot of physical modeling. Mine was down mostly at ERDIC, and did a little bit at some of the local private consulting labs up in the Northwest as well. But I'm a big believer in the physical models. Now, the problem is they're not always feasible, and nobody wants to spend the money to put one together, especially now that you can do a lot of this stuff with a CFD model. But I'm telling you, there's nothing better than setting up a physical model to really understand what you're going to get if it's done.
And I will say, I mean, of course, there was a lot of thought put into every project about whether it really was worth it or not. But every project where we built a scale model, we were able to save the construction costs of the model construction by by optimizing the design
Yeah.
in the modeling process. So it's such an opportunity to, to see exactly, or not exactly, obviously, because you're at a scale, but almost exactly how things are going to behave for a total range of different flow rates. And yeah, it gives you the confidence and the ability to optimize a design and hopefully save some money, and hopefully save enough money that makes building the model worth it.
Yeah, and the other thing too that I really enjoyed about physical modeling is the ability to collaborate. When you can get a group of people together and stand around the model and quickly change something. Somebody says, hey, what if we do it this way? And you could literally within minutes add a piece to the model or change the shape of this or that. Yes. Sometimes you couldn't do it that quickly, but there are a lot of things you could do quickly and you could check it out and move from there. Whereas even today with sophisticated modeling applications like Flow3D and others, it's usually a single person that's working at their desk, and
right.
They produce these videos and then they send them out and people look at them and then they throw their ideas back. But it's not this kind of immediate collaboration that you can get standing around a physical model.
Yeah. And the other part of that, I mean, this is a reality of consulting, is the physical models were always a really nice tool to get owners on board with the design, right? To let them really see why is it necessary that we spend all this money, on this structure? It seems so overdone. And when they can really see, the full PMF running through a spillway and how violent that is, and how, how much concrete and is required to contain it, they really get on board. And so a lot of times when we did have a physical model built, we'd fly the board members of the owner to come witness it and come be a part of that process, because it is such a good tool, just such a good communication tool too.
Yeah, definitely. And it's fun to bring them down because they're always very excited about it too.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, no matter who you are, it's awesome to see stuff like that. So it's worth it in a lot of cases. Yeah, I definitely encourage, if you're involved in a project like this, especially one, at a large scale, it's definitely worth consideration.
So Grady, when are you going to build a large scale physical model of a dam spillway for one of your videos?
I don't know. Someday. I've got the big acrylic flume in the garage, and I've been lucky enough to have a lot of popular videos about open channel flow hydraulics, and some really cool hydraulic phenomena.
Yeah, the weir. I just watched the weir video. That was really cool when you talked about the different sort of weirs and how that affects water surface elevation.
So that's the kind of stuff I love. So you never know. It might have the spillway model coming soon.
Yeah, this is where your woodworking skills really add to the channel. And I related to that, I have to know, what is your shop like, Grady? Because I've got my woodworking shop. It's my man cave.
Yeah.
I love collecting tools. One of my favorite things is when my wife will say, "Hey, I want you to do this. I want you to. Can you build? What was the latest one? Or install some flooring or whatever. Or can you redo the kitchen counters or whatever it is?" It always results in a new tool for me. So that's
yeah.
But I want to know about your shop and what are some of the cool tools you have? Do you have a CNC machine yet?
No, I don't have that. Actually, my shop is pretty basic. Over the years, it's gotten more feasible for me to just like hire out some of the stuff, like especially when I build something out of acrylic. There's companies who will cut it for you to the right size, and so it just makes more sense for me to spend less time out in the shop and more time, writing and researching and stuff like that. But I still do, I still try to build some kind of physical demo for every video that's not like a current event or a journalistic topic, like anything that's kind of fundamental to engineering. I try to build something to show how it works at scale. And so, I have just a decent set of tools. You asked what my shop looked like, and it just looks messy. That's it.
Mine too. Yeah, I get it.
But yeah, I work in a one-car garage, and over the years, it's kind of grown to to just be focused on the demos. And so I don't do a lot with wood anymore, right? I mean, a lot of my models are acrylic or metal or something like that. So I've gotten a little bit into welding, but a lot of the models I make are acrylic. So it's a lot of cutting, smoothing, solvent welding, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Grady, it's been awesome having you on. You've been really generous with your time. I personally is very excited to have you here so we could talk to you about your videos and just engineering in general. Ben, do you want to kind of close this out with what we got coming up, and then we'll give Grady a chance to plug his stuff?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, thanks, Grady, for joining us. We'll give you a second here. In a second here, we'll give you an opportunity to kind of plug some things, but wanted to just kind of go over what's coming up in our HEC-RAS training world. Our next 1D, 2D training is going to be starting on February 23rd. So for those of you guys who are interested in taking that class, keep an eye out for announcements and opportunity to sign up for that class. We've been having very full classes, and so if you're interested in signing up, make sure that you register right away and don't wait. Last class did actually fill up before the class started, and so we had to turn some folks to the spring class. So make sure you sign up as quick as you can for that. Other than that, Chris, I don't have any other announcements. Do you?
No. Just keep an eye out on our webpage for classes, and we'll make sure to mention them on the podcast. Any classes coming up. Grady, it's been awesome having you on board. Next time you're in Portland, if you ever get up this way again, please let us know, and I'd love to, buy you a meal or something and hang out a little bit, talk some more geeky stuff. But really cool having you on. And what do you have coming up? What are some of the things you want to talk about and let people know that you've got in the works here?
Yeah, so we've ramped up to putting 2 videos out per month on the YouTube channel Practical Engineering. So I mean, that's the main place where you can keep an eye on me. Usually the first Tuesday of every month is something fundamental to civil engineering, and the third Tuesday is usually some kind of current event or a more journalistic topic. And then later next year, I've got a book coming out actually that's kind of a field guide to infrastructure. It's called Engineering in Plain Sight. So that's an in-progress thing, but should go on pre-sale in March and be published in August next year. So I'm excited about that. Still working really hard on it. So
does that book kind of reflect some of the similar lessons that are in episodes, or what's kind of the general context of it?
Yeah, so each section is kind of its own mini practical engineering episode, but it's really kind of modeled around field guides for birds or for rocks or whatever. It's leaned into the constructed environment. So it's kind of a way for you to look out your front door or look out on a road trip and kind of see and learn how the things work that you see in everyday life.
Yeah, like, that's what that big giant crane is doing out there that I've been my drive.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
That sounds like a great gift to give to a high school student that's kind of on the fence about what they want to do in college. You're like, hey, spend some time looking through this and walking around your city or whatnot, and you might be hooked.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, very cool. Well, hey, thanks again, Grady. Really appreciate it, and best of luck moving forward. I can only imagine what a big step this was for you, and I hope it goes great and all the success and that you can get out of this. So thanks again for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you ever have any questions about HEC-RAS,
I know who to reach out to. Got it.
Awesome. Well, this has been Full Momentum and HEC-RAS podcast with Grady Hillhouse. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us today.